The whole class burst out laughing when Mr. Thompson, the smug AP calculus teacher, handed the chalk to Emma Johnson, the elderly janitor. She was just a janitor, after all, a kind, quiet woman with hands worn from years of hard work. When Mr. Thompson sarcastically challenged her to solve the most difficult calculus problem in the room, no one thought she'd do anything but back down. What happened next would leave everyone frozen, their jaws on the floor. Emma didn't just solve the problem. She shattered expectations and revealed a genius no one saw coming. Before we start, like this video, subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. Now let's begin. The bell rang, signaling the start of the third period. But there was an unexpected tension in the air. Today, the students in Mr. Thompson's advanced placement calculus class were used to a certain routine: silence, the clatter of pens, and the steady rhythm of their teacher's lectures. But today, the classroom felt different. Emma Johnson, the school janitor, stood quietly by the door, mopping the floors as she did every day. No one noticed her as she entered. Her worn sneakers barely made a sound on the polished floor. To most of them, she was just a janitor, a background figure who arrived before they did and left after they had gone home. But Mr. Thompson had other plans. Known for his sharp wit and constant need to be the center of attention, he scanned the room, his eyes glinting with an idea. "Class," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "We've been struggling with this calculus problem for a week now. Maybe Emma can solve it." He pointed at the board, where a particularly tough equation was written. The students, most of whom had been stumped by the problem, burst into laughter. Emma paused for a moment, her mop in hand, not fully understanding the joke. "Come on, Emma," Mr. Thompson said with a grin. "I'm sure you've seen enough math around here. Why don't you show the class how it's done?" He gestured toward the chalkboard, a mocking challenge in his tone. The class erupted into more laughter. A few students sneered as they turned their attention toward Emma. They thought she would back away, embarrassed, like any normal person would. But Emma Johnson wasn't just any normal person. She stood there for a moment as the laughter echoed in the room. Her mind raced. She had heard the jokes before. People often underestimated her because of her age, her job, and her unassuming nature. But what they didn't know was that Emma had a secret. A long time ago, she had been a star student at Harvard University, one of the brightest minds in her class. Life, however, had taken her down a different path, and she found herself mopping floors instead of solving complex equations. But not today. Today, Emma decided to take a stand. With calm resolve, Emma set her mop aside. The class fell silent, unsure of what would happen next. Slowly, she walked to the chalkboard. Her steps were steady, her back straight. The chalk squeaked as she took it in her hand. With that single motion, the room seemed to hold its breath. Emma paused for a moment, analyzing the equation. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, darted back and forth across the numbers and symbols. The class watched her. Some were still snickering, while others were too curious to look away. Mr. Thompson leaned against his desk, arms crossed, a smug look on his face. He was certain she would fail, and that was exactly what he was counting on. But Emma Johnson wasn't going to fail. As her hand moved across the board, the students' laughter began to fade, replaced by a hushed curiosity. Emma's calculations were precise, her every movement deliberate. What began as a simple joke was now unfolding into something far more than anyone had expected. The students who had laughed now stared, their expressions shifting from disbelief to awe. Mr. Thompson's confident smirk slowly faded, replaced by a look of shock. Emma wasn't just solving the problem, she was crushing it. When she finished, she stepped back from the board. The equation, once a seemingly impossible riddle, now stood solved. The classroom was silent. The students, stunned into inaction, couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. The woman they had mocked, the janitor they had underestimated, had done what they thought was impossible. She had solved the problem with ease. The moment hung in the air, thick with disbelief. No one moved. No one spoke. They were all too shocked to even breathe. And in that silence, Emma Johnson, the humble janitor, had earned something far more valuable than a grade: respect. The room remained frozen in silence. The weight of Emma's actions still hung in the air. No one spoke. No one moved. For a long moment, it felt like time itself had stopped, leaving only the sound of Emma's breath and the faint scratching of chalk on the board. Mr. Thompson stood still, leaning against his desk, unable to comprehend what had just happened. The smug look he had worn moments ago was gone, replaced by a mix of confusion and a dawning sense of respect, something he hadn't expected. The students, however, were the first to break the silence. It started with a whisper from the back of the room, a voice barely audible but heavy with disbelief. Did she really just solve that? A few heads turned to see who had spoken, then they looked back at Emma, their eyes wide. One by one, their laughter from earlier transformed into something else. Awe. Some of the students who had mocked her earlier were now staring, mouths agape, unsure of how to react. Emma didn't say a word. She simply stood there, her back straight, as the equation on the board seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights. It was as if the problem had been conquered, not just solved, but defeated, and it had been done by someone they all thought was incapable of such a feat. A few students began to exchange nervous glances. One whispered, she's a genius. But Emma, still quiet, was far from seeking any kind of recognition. This wasn't about proving anyone wrong or showing off her abilities. It was about taking control of the moment. It was about reclaiming a sense of dignity and power that had been stripped away over the years. It wasn't the first time Emma had been underestimated. Her whole life, people had made assumptions about her because of her job, her age, and her unassuming demeanor. Most people saw her as invisible, someone to be ignored or overlooked. But Emma had learned long ago that the world often misunderstood those who worked behind the scenes. They saw her as a janitor, a mere servant to clean up after others. But what they didn't know, what they could never have imagined, was that Emma Johnson wasn't just any janitor. She had once been on the fast track to becoming a world-class mathematician, a star student with a mind that could solve the most complex problems with ease. But life had a way of shifting paths. Family responsibilities, financial struggles, and a series of hard decisions had forced her to leave behind her dream of a career in mathematics. She had taken the job as a janitor, never expecting it to become her permanent role. It was a job that kept the lights on, but it wasn't who she truly was. Today, however, in this classroom, she had reminded everyone, and herself, of the brilliance she still possessed, even if it had been buried under years of routine and unnoticed effort. The bell rang, signaling the end of class, but the students didn't move. No one was ready to leave, not yet. Emma made her way back to the door, her mop in hand. But before she could step out, Mr. Thompson finally found his voice. Emma, he said, his tone softer now, a mixture of admiration and something else, something almost like apology. I didn't know. Emma turned to face him. Her eyes were calm and steady. She didn't need his apology. She didn't need anything from him, really. She had already proven everything she needed to prove. Without saying another word, she nodded, offering a small, knowing smile before she walked out of the classroom. As the door closed behind her, the students slowly began to stir. A few were still in shock, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Others were whispering among themselves, speaking in hushed tones. Did you know she was that smart? One student asked, the question carrying a sense of wonder. Another replied, I never thought she was capable of that. I'm kind of embarrassed. In the days that followed, Emma's reputation began to shift. The students who had once ignored her, the ones who had mocked her, started to see her differently. They began to understand that there was more to Emma Johnson than met the eye. She wasn't just the janitor. She was someone who had an untold history, a story of unrealized potential, a woman whose life had taken a different turn, but who still held within her the power of brilliance. And as for Emma, she simply went about her work, her job, as if nothing had changed. But deep down, she knew something had shifted, not just for her, but for everyone who had witnessed that moment. They had seen her for who she really was, a person who had been underestimated but who, in the end, had proven her worth. And Emma Johnson was no longer invisible. The next few days at Lincoln High were different. Emma Johnson, the janitor, had become an unspoken legend. Students who had once ignored her now looked at her with new eyes. They passed her in the hallways with a subtle nod of respect, as if they had finally realized something they had missed all along. It wasn't just her problem-solving skills that had impressed them. It was the way she had handled the entire situation. She had stood tall, unshaken, in front of the class and proved that she was more than just her job title. But what had truly stunned them was that Emma had shown them something they didn't even know they needed to see: the power of quiet confidence. Mr. Thompson, the very teacher who had dared to challenge Emma in the first place, was no exception. He couldn't stop thinking about what had happened in that classroom. The smug, confident man who had once been so sure of himself now found himself second-guessing his own decisions. For years, he had thought of Emma as just a background character in the high school drama, someone who swept the floors, cleaned the bathrooms, and made sure the school stayed in order. But now he knew he had misjudged her completely. One afternoon, a week after the incident, Mr. Thompson found himself standing at the door of the janitor's closet. He wasn't sure what had prompted him to do it. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe it was simply the need to acknowledge the truth. He knocked lightly. "Emma," he called, his voice hesitant. Emma looked up from the bucket she was cleaning. Her face was unreadable, as always. She had learned a long time ago not to seek attention. But when she saw Mr. Thompson standing there, she couldn't help but wonder what this was about. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" he asked, his tone softer than usual. Emma gave a slow nod, setting down the mop and wiping her hands on her uniform. She knew that this conversation wasn't going to be like the others. This time, she could feel the change in the air, the shift in the dynamic between them. "Of course, Mr. Thompson," she replied, her voice steady but with a warmth in it, a small acknowledgement that she wasn't the same woman who had walked into that classroom a week ago. Mr. Thompson stepped inside the janitor's closet, looking around briefly at the disarray of cleaning supplies. The smell of bleach and soap lingered in the air. He cleared his throat. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I didn't realize who I was dealing with." Emma raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. The apology, though unexpected, was unnecessary. She had already forgiven him in her mind the moment she solved that equation. But this was different. This was Mr. Thompson acknowledging that he had been wrong. It was rare. "You didn't know," she said quietly. "Most people don't. But that doesn't mean I didn't have the ability all along. It just means that I've been hiding it for a long time." Mr. Thompson nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. "I've been teaching here for years, and I've always assumed I was the smartest person in the room. But you've taught me something I didn't know I needed to learn. Sometimes, the most brilliant minds aren't the ones who get the spotlight. Sometimes, they're the ones who work quietly, unnoticed." Emma's eyes softened slightly. "We all have our paths, Mr. Thompson. Mine just led me here. But that doesn't mean I don't still have something to offer." There was a pause, and for a moment, Emma saw a flicker of something in Mr. Thompson's eyes, something like respect, but also something deeper, a recognition of her worth, not just as a janitor, but as a person. He cleared his throat again, standing up straighter. I want to make it right," he said, his voice firm now. "I'll be putting in a good word for you. You deserve more than just this job." Emma was taken aback by his words, but she didn't let it show. She had never sought recognition or special treatment. She had lived her life without the need for validation from anyone. But Mr. Thompson's gesture, it felt like a small victory, a quiet, almost imperceptible win. She smiled faintly, though her expression remained humble. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson, but I don't need more. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And honestly, this is all I need." Mr. Thompson stood there for a moment, as if searching for the right words. But in the end, there was nothing left to say. He had learned his lesson. Emma Johnson was more than just a janitor. She was a force to be reckoned with, and he would never forget the lesson she had taught him. As he left the janitor's closet, Emma returned to her work, her mop in hand. The halls of Lincoln High buzzed with the sounds of students rushing to their next classes. But Emma walked with a quiet confidence. She had shown them all that no one, no matter their job or appearance, was ever truly invisible. She had taken a stand, and in doing so, had shown them what it meant to truly recognize someone for who they were, not for what they appeared to be. And just like that, the world around her had changed. Weeks passed, and Lincoln High had transformed. Emma Johnson, once an unnoticed figure in the background, now commanded a level of respect that no one could have predicted. It wasn't just from the students. The faculty, too, began to see her in a different light. Some of the teachers who had previously dismissed her with a wave now found themselves looking at her with admiration. Emma's quiet presence had begun to change the atmosphere of the school, and not just because of her brilliance. It was the way she carried herself, like she had nothing to prove to anyone, but still managed to teach everyone around her a lesson without saying a word. One morning, Emma was cleaning the cafeteria when Principal Harris walked by. He had always been a man of few words, but this time, he stopped. "Emma," he said, his voice hesitant, "I need to talk to you." Emma sat down her broom and looked up, surprised. "What's on your mind, Mr. Harris?" The principal hesitated, as though gathering his thoughts. "I've been hearing things about what happened in Mr. Thompson's class." He paused, his expression unreadable. "The students, they've been talking. They're calling you a genius. And honestly, I think they're right." Emma felt a small, fleeting rush of pride at the word genius. She had never heard it used to describe her, but hearing it now, coming from the principal, felt different. It felt earned. But she didn't let it show. Instead, she nodded politely. "I don't need to be a genius, Mr. Harris. I'm just doing my job." The principal studied her for a moment, as if he was searching for something. "I've heard about your past, Emma, how you were once on track to become a mathematician. I didn't know that. I didn't know any of that." Emma shrugged, a quiet smile on her lips. "Most people don't. It's just, life has a way of leading us in different directions." Principal Harris seemed to wrestle with his thoughts for a moment before continuing. "Well, I want you to know something. I've been thinking about the way we run things here, about how we treat people, how we treat the staff. You've shown me that I've been looking at everything wrong." He cleared his throat. "You've reminded me that everyone has value, no matter their position or background." Emma said nothing. She wasn't here for his praise or recognition. She had made her peace long ago with where she was in life. But she couldn't help feeling a small sense of satisfaction at the way things were shifting, at the way people were starting to see beyond the surface. "I want to offer you something, Emma," Principal Harris said, his voice steady now. "We have an opening for a part-time position in the math department. It's not a lot, but it's something, a chance to get back to what you love. You could teach, help students with advanced problems, or even run some after-school tutoring sessions. What do you think?" Emma felt a lump in her throat. The offer was tempting, so tempting that it made her heart race for a split second. She imagined herself back in the classroom, standing in front of a blackboard, explaining complex equations to a group of eager students. It had been so long since she had thought about teaching. But then she shook her head, clearing the vision from her mind. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Harris. Really I do. But that's not my path anymore." She took a deep breath. "I found my place here, doing what I'm doing. I'm content with that." The principal looked at her, clearly impressed by her strength and clarity. "I understand," he said, nodding slowly. "But just know, Emma, you're always welcome to teach here if you ever change your mind. You've already proven that you have something incredible to offer." Emma smiled, a small but genuine smile. "Thank you, Mr. Harris. But I'm exactly where I need to be." As the principal walked away, Emma returned to her work. But this time, something had changed inside her. She had been given the opportunity to go back to what she once loved, but she had chosen a different path, and it was one that had brought her peace. The school may have seen her as a janitor, but Emma knew who she really was. She wasn't defined by a job title or an old dream. She was defined by her strength, her intelligence, and the quiet resilience she had carried with her all these years. And if anyone was ever going to remember her, they would remember her for that. The rumors about Emma's brilliance continued to spread throughout the school, but what mattered most was that they no longer mattered to her. She had already proven everything she needed to prove, and with that, she walked through the halls with a quiet confidence that no one could take away. It's been months now, and Emma Johnson has become more than just a legend at Lincoln High. She had become a symbol of resilience, of hidden talents, of people who go unnoticed yet hold the power to change everything. Emma never asked for recognition, and yet it had found her. The students who once laughed at her, the teachers who doubted her, they all now looked at her with awe. The truth was undeniable. Emma had shown them that brilliance doesn't come in a package anyone expects. Sometimes, it comes in the form of a janitor. One afternoon, as Emma was walking through the hallways, she overheard a conversation between two students. They were discussing her, as they often did now. They didn't realize she was walking just a few steps behind them. "Have you heard about Mrs. Johnson?" one of them asked, clearly in awe. "I heard she solved some calculus problems like it was nothing. They said she was a mathematician before she started working here." "Can you believe that? A janitor who's a genius." The other student nodded, eyes wide. "Yeah, I heard she's tutoring some of the top students now. I think she could have been a professor if she wanted to. It's crazy." Emma couldn't help but smile to herself. These students were right, in a way. She could have been a professor, or a mathematician, or anything else. But her life had taken a different turn, and that was okay. She had found peace in the work she did, even if it wasn't what others expected. But as she walked past them, Emma couldn't help but wonder if they had truly understood her. They spoke of her brilliance, her intelligence, as if that was all that mattered. They hadn't realized the most important thing she had learned in life, the thing that had truly shaped her. It wasn't about what you could do or how smart you were. It was about finding your place and finding peace with where you were in life, regardless of what anyone else thought. That night, Emma received an unexpected call. It was Principal Harris again. "Emma," he said, his voice serious, "I need to talk to you about something." Emma felt a small twinge of unease. "What's going on, Mr. Harris?" "There's something big happening," he said, his voice urgent now. "A new initiative is being launched across the district, and they've asked us to be part of it. They want to showcase real-life success stories, people who overcame obstacles and found success against all odds. They're looking for someone to speak about their journey, to inspire others. And I've recommended you." Emma was silent for a moment. She hadn't asked for any spotlight, had never imagined herself in that position. But there was a part of her, deep down, that knew this was an opportunity to share her story, to tell others that it's okay to be different, to find your own path, even when the world tells you otherwise. She took a deep breath. "I appreciate it, Mr. Harris, but I don't know if I'm the right person for this." "You are, Emma, more than you realize," he said, his voice full of conviction. "You've already shown everyone here what real success looks like. It's not about being in the spotlight. It's about being true to yourself. And that's what people need to hear." Emma could feel the weight of his words, but the thought of speaking in front of a crowd, sharing her story, made her feel nervous. She wasn't sure if she was ready for that kind of attention. But then she remembered the students who had looked up to her, the way their eyes had changed when they realized who she really was. Maybe this was the chance to show them that anyone, no matter their background, could make a difference. "I'll do it," Emma finally said, her voice steady. "I'll share my story for them." The decision had been made. Emma was going to step out of the shadows and into the light, not for the praise, but for the students who needed to hear her message. She didn't need the applause, didn't need the recognition, but she did want to help others find their own path, just as she had. The day of the event arrived, and Emma stood in front of a crowd of students, teachers, and community leaders. The room fell silent as she began to speak. Her voice was calm but powerful. "I'm not a genius," she started, "but I've learned that what matters isn't how smart you are or what people expect you to be. What matters is that you find your own way. And even if you end up somewhere you didn't expect, that doesn't mean you failed. It means you found a different path. And sometimes, that's the most important lesson of all." The room was quiet for a long time after she finished. No applause, no loud cheers, just silence. But in that silence, Emma knew that her words had reached them. And in that moment, she realized that she didn't need the world's validation. She had already proven to herself that she was enough. As she walked off the stage, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. The journey she had taken, the lessons she had learned, it was all worth it. And now, Lincoln High would never see her the same way again. If this story inspired you or gave you chills, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with your friends and family. And if you want more powerful and emotional stories like this one, Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. We'd also love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below about this story, and if you enjoyed this story, give it a big thumbs up. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that touch hearts and inspire change. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next story.